What if one of hip-hop's biggest icons was living a double life? For decades, Sean Diddy Combs was the face of success in the music industry. A Grammy-winning producer, a rap mogul, a fashion icon, a man who turned Bad Boy Records into a cultural powerhouse. But behind the designer suits, the luxury parties, and the million-dollar smile, something much darker was lurking, something no one wanted to believe. Because lately, the headlines haven't been about platinum records or business deals. They've been about accusations, serious ones, sex trafficking, assault, manipulation, even talk of revenge fantasies and violent outbursts. At first, people thought it was just noise, just another celebrity scandal that would fade away. But then the stories started piling up, too many to ignore. One by one, former girlfriends, assistants, and industry insiders began to speak out. And what they described was not just disturbing, it was chilling. This isn't just about a fall from grace. This is about unraveling a story that's been hiding in plain sight for years. And once it started, there was no stopping it. Because when Cassie spoke up, everything changed. From icon to accused, Sean Combs wasn't just another rapper, he was the culture. With hits like I'll Be Missing You and Bad Boy for Life, he built an empire that blurred the lines between music, fashion, and business. He dated stars, launched Ciroc, ruled red carpets, and mentored legends. If you were in the industry, you wanted to be in his circle, or at least close enough to benefit from his shine. But while the world saw a king, those inside the castle saw something else. Behind the velvet ropes and flashing cameras, Combs was known to some as controlling, intense, explosive. There were whispers, but nothing stuck. No one dared to say too much, because calling out someone with that kind of power, that could cost you everything. And then came November 2023. That's when Cassie Ventura, his longtime girlfriend and former artist, filed a lawsuit that didn't just accuse Combs of abuse. It painted a graphic picture of control, manipulation, and years of trauma. The story was explosive, and yet barely scratched the surface. The suit was settled almost immediately, but the damage had already been done. Because once that silence was broken, others started to come forward too. And what followed wasn't just a few isolated claims, it was a tidal wave. Cassie's shocking testimony. When Cassie stepped into the spotlight again, it wasn't to release music or walk a red carpet. It was to tell the world what she says really happened behind closed doors. And what she described wasn't just toxic, it was terrifying. She claimed Combs repeatedly assaulted her, that he forced her into sexual acts with other men, that he filmed it, that he used those recordings to control her, to keep her silent, and that for years she lived in fear of losing her career, her safety, and the man she once loved. According to Cassie, these weren't isolated events. They were routine. She talked about freak-offs, wild parties filled with drugs, cameras, strangers, and no way to say no. She said she'd been coerced, drugged, manipulated, and still she stayed because walking away didn't feel like an option. At one point, even her own mother got pulled into the nightmare. Regina Ventura testified that during a break in Cassie and Combs' relationship, he allegedly threatened to leak explicit videos to get Cassie back. She even showed photos from 2011, documenting bruises and injuries on her daughter's body. By the time she finished her testimony, it was clear. This wasn't about one relationship gone bad. This was about control, power, and fear. And Cassie wasn't the only one who lived it, because after her, the floodgates opened, and the stories only got darker. More women, more accusations. Cassie's story cracked the surface. What came next blew it wide open. One by one, more women, and even some men, stepped forward with stories that echoed the same disturbing pattern: violence, control, and silence. Former assistants, artists, and insiders described what they saw and experienced while working under Combs. And it wasn't just emotional manipulation. They were talking about physical abuse, threats, and worse. One former assistant, who testified under the name Mia, told the court about the chaos of working for Combs. It was toxic, it could be exciting, but when it was bad, it was very, very bad. She described being assaulted, humiliated, even raped by Combs. She claimed he once threw ice buckets at her, dragged her across the floor, and forced himself on her while she pretended to sleep. I felt ashamed and scared, she said, and she wasn't the only one with scars. Singer Dawn Richard testified that she witnessed Combs beat Cassie with a frying pan while Cassie was curled up on the kitchen floor. Another ex-assistant, Capricorn Clark, claimed he once plotted to break into Kid Cudi's house and handle him over jealousy about his brief relationship with Cassie. He had a gun in his hand, she said. Kid Cudi later confirmed the story, adding that Combs threatened to blow up his car, and not long after, it did go up in flames. The stories all started to connect. Manipulation, violence, control, and a hunger for dominance that went far beyond music or business. But the most disturbing part? These weren't tabloid rumors. These were sworn testimonies, under oath. The raid that changed everything. By early 2024, the noise around Diddy had become impossible to ignore. But it wasn't until federal agents showed up at his homes that things really escalated. In a move that shocked the industry, law enforcement raided Combs' mansions in Los Angeles and Miami. These weren't just casual searches. They were full-scale federal raids. Doors kicked in, safes cracked open, everything turned upside down. And what they found raised even more questions. Inside, investigators uncovered over 24 bottles of baby oil and lubricant. In another room, a luxury designer bag was filled with drugs. Pills, cocaine, ketamine, MDMA. The implication? This wasn't just a party lifestyle. It looked more like a system, a carefully controlled environment of power, sex, and substances. For the authorities, this wasn't just about personal behavior. It was about organized crime. Prosecutors began connecting the dots between witness testimonies, the raid findings, and years of sealed reports. Suddenly, Diddy wasn't just facing lawsuits. He was up against federal charges, sex trafficking, organized exploitation, coercion. And if he's convicted, he could spend the rest of his life behind bars. The once untouchable mogul was no longer above scrutiny. The house of cards had started to fall. But what made it all the more surreal? This wasn't some shadowy figure hiding in the dark. This was a man who had been center stage for decades, and now his entire empire was in freefall. The music industry's silent problem. What shocked people most wasn't just the accusations. It was how long they went unnoticed, or maybe more accurately, ignored. Sean Combs wasn't operating in a vacuum. He was surrounded by executives, assistants, bodyguards, artists, people who saw the chaos up close. And yet for years, no one said a word. Why? Because in the music industry, power protects power. Combs wasn't just a rapper, he made careers. A cosign from Diddy could launch you into stardom. A falling out, it could bury you. That kind of influence doesn't just silence victims, it freezes everyone around them. Labels, media outlets, even former friends chose to look the other way, afraid of what speaking up might cost them. There's also the deeper, darker truth. Combs wasn't the first. Before him, it was R. Kelly. Before that, people whispered about others. The industry has a history of rewarding brilliance and ignoring brutality, as long as the hits keep coming and the money keeps flowing. But the Combs case is starting to shift that. Now, lawyers in Houston say they're representing over 100 people with accusations tied to Diddy. That's not just a lawsuit, it's a reckoning. And for an industry built on image, the mask is finally slipping. Because this isn't just about one man. It's about the culture that let him thrive for decades. What happens now? As of now, Sean Diddy Combs maintains his innocence. He's pled not guilty to every criminal charge, and his lawyers insist the stories are exaggerated or flat out false. But that hasn't stopped the walls from closing in. The trial continues, with more witnesses expected to testify. Behind the scenes, civil lawsuits are piling up. Brands are cutting ties. Former collaborators are going silent. And the once celebrated mogul now walks under the weight of scandal, facing a future that could include life in prison. But beyond the courtroom, the real question is bigger. How did it take this long? How did someone so visible, so powerful, manage to stay untouchable for decades, while so many suffered behind the scenes? And now that the silence is breaking, will the industry finally change? Or will it just wait for the next headline to fade? What happens next, for Combs, for his accusers, and for the music world, will be written in the months to come. But one thing's already clear. The legend of Diddy is no longer just a story of fame and fortune. It's now a cautionary tale about power, silence, and the truth that eventually surfaces, no matter how long it's been buried.